With the arrest of David's apparent friend, Neo Langston, we took the time to dive a bit more into who he is, the circumstances of his capture, and what his potential role could be in this case. The case of the death of a teenage girl found in the trunk of a car reportedly registered to the romantic homicide singer. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, I gotta say this real quick. If you're putting things online, if you're posting clips, if you're in content creation, do you ever wonder how we're able to share so many clips so quickly? We use something called Opus Clip. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it so easy to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform. Through AI, Opus Clip generates B-roll, it reframes footage, and it even cleans up audio. And it is so easy. You just visit opus.pro/sidebar, you sign up, you upload, and in minutes you have perfectly edited clips ready to go. For TikTok, Shorts, Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop. And having a tool like Opus Clip means that our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. This is the most powerful tool there is to share ideas and edit like a pro. So go to opus.pro/sidebar to get a free week and then 50% off. Okay, so look, we were in such a rush on Friday with the breaking news of the arrest of David's friend or apparent friend, Neo Langston, that we didn't really get a chance to really discuss everything we know about this guy. And, by the way, his alleged connection to this case, because there was more that came out afterwards. There was more that came out over the weekend. So that's what we want to do right now. Dedicate a little bit more time to Neo Langston, because this is a big deal. This is a big deal. An investigation that was launched after the decomposed body of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was found in a Tesla out in Los Angeles, reportedly registered to singer David. There hasn't really been a lot that we know, a lot that we can even confirm. There have been no arrests, there have been no charges. And let's be clear about what Langston was arrested for and what he wasn't currently. But this comes, as it was reported, a grand jury may be hearing evidence out in Los Angeles in connection with Celeste's death. And that's interesting because at first we thought that this was an investigative grand jury that would help with getting witness testimony, maybe getting the production of evidence, but they couldn't return an indictment. Then the reporting seemed to suggest, no, this is a grand jury that can return an indictment. So just presuming that for a moment, we got to talk about it. Okay, to be clear, while there have been reports about David's alleged involvement, and that he's considered a suspect, and that he may be facing homicide charges, authorities haven't confirmed that. That's not surprising in a case like this, but just want to make that clear too. But Neo Langston, okay, 23 years old, reported online streamer who apparently has been featured in photos and videos with the romantic homicide singer in the past. He was arrested last week, reportedly on a felony charge of failing to appear as a witness, seemingly out of a case in Los Angeles, that this was a warrant from the LAPD, more specifically the Robbery Homicide Division that is in fact investigating Celeste's death. And we reported that he was arrested out in Montana, more specifically Helena, Montana. This is according to TMZ, that he was booked into the Lewis and Clark County Detention Center at 5:56 p.m. on January 22nd. This is per LA Mag. But now, this is a new piece of information. We have learned that he was apparently apprehended at his mother's house, his mother Cynthia's house, reportedly on Ninth Street, which is apparently a residential neighborhood. Now, LA Mag, Los Angeles Mag, saying that he was wearing a gray hoodie, brown beanie, and navy blue sweats when he was arrested. And you know what's interesting about him allegedly being picked up at his mom's place? I got to call this out. According to TMZ, they say that public records indicate that his mom bought that house in March of 2025. Why is that significant? So while we don't know for sure whether Langston is connected to Celeste's case or not, if he is allegedly involved, and we don't know in what capacity, that timing is important, because if it's true, Celeste apparently disappeared in 2024 from Lake Elsinore, California. And investigators believe that she had been dead for quite some time when she was found in that car on September 8th, 2025. Now, we don't know the exact cause of death, the manner of death, the time of death. Remember, the ME, the medical examiner's records, the office records are sealed. This is due to a court order that was sought by the LAPD. But remember when the LAPD recently released a statement that said, quote, "We have evidence that David traveled to the Santa Barbara area sometime during the spring of 2025. The reason for that trip is still under investigation, and we've drawn no conclusions at this point about the relevance of the trip to this case." So that house was apparently bought in March of 2025, now thinking what else may have happened in spring of 2025. As I mentioned in a previous episode of Sidebar, Steve Fisher, the private investigator who's connected to this case, he says the last proof of life photo they have of Celeste is from January of 2025. So again, timing there is interesting. But I want to go back to what has come out since our last report of Neo Langston. So according to LA Mag, his case was handled by the district court, which indicates a felony was at issue here. And according to a service report, a total of 7 police officers were called to his mom's house to arrest him. And also TMZ reporting that while it seems David and Langston appeared together on social media, in the time leading up to when Celeste's body was found, Langston allegedly deleted or archived photos of him with David. Again, allegation, something to be thinking about. So based on the reporting, it was speculated, okay, could he have failed to appear as a witness in this apparent ongoing grand jury proceeding that's happening in LA? That's a fair conclusion. And again, potentially a grand jury hearing evidence in the David Celeste case. Now, while the LAPD hasn't come out and said that, there is potentially evidence to support it. Why? The reason we say that is because, as we previously reported per TMZ, that back in December of 2025, there may have been a conversation in the hallway of the courthouse between Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman, so this is a career homicide prosecutor who is allegedly spearheading the Celeste case, and an attorney named Evan Jennis. Now, Evan Jennis apparently represents Robert Morgenroth, heads up David's touring company as David's manager, and the conversation, per TMZ, was about a potentially uncooperative witness. In fact, Silverman allegedly told Jennis that she was going to have the judge issue a body attachment. So this is a legal way to get a witness to appear in front of the court. Now look, we have no idea if this conversation actually happened or if the alleged uncooperative witness is Neo Langston, but I gotta call it out. I gotta say this, right? So what happened? Well, Langston was transported to Los Angeles. He was booked into the Metropolitan Detention Center. This is per TMZ. And he was released after posting $60,000 bail on Saturday. Now, I will say Steve Fisher, again, he is the private investigator who was hired by the property owner where David was apparently staying at, which was near where that Tesla was found. He posted on X, as a point of clarification, Neo Langston was not booked or housed at the LA Sheriff's Department Twin Towers Jail in Los Angeles. He was extradited and taken to LAPD's Metropolitan Detention Center, different than the federal MDC, and he bonded out from there. The Sheriff's Department is responsible for reporting all prisoners being held in Los Angeles County, which is why he appears on their website. And he also says that he bonded out at 9:41 a.m. this morning. He's no longer in custody. Now, putting that to the side, if he bonded out $60,000 bail on Saturday, it does become a question of if he will testify and how he will testify, what he would say, what value his potential testimony would be. Because again, assuming he sought to testify in that grand jury, there is something there. Now, I do have to call this out too. When it was being reported that David was being considered a suspect in Celeste's death, there was chatter out there about whether a second suspect was being considered too by authorities. And if that is true, now we got to wonder, is this Langston? Which is interesting because he's being called as a witness, right? He's not a potential person being charged, which, by the way, Steve Fisher, which I'm going to show in a minute, has some thoughts about. But there's always been speculation that maybe multiple people, multiple actors have been responsible in some way with what happened to Celeste, even just the placement of her body. Now, acclaimed criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos spoke on the Two Angry Men podcast back in November that according to people he apparently spoke to who are connected to the case, investigators may be looking at a newly unidentified second person that was involved, quote, before, during, and after Celeste's death, that they may have digital evidence to support this, cell phone data, social media activity, digital data from the Tesla, and that this evidence places this person in the same Hollywood Hills neighborhood during the time when either Celeste died or her body was found. So again, we don't know for sure what Langston's alleged role is or could be, but got to call that out too if they're talking about maybe a second suspect. Now, let me mention here Steve Fisher, okay? Because Steve Fisher went on X and was quite vocal about this. Okay, he's been very outspoken before, but when it came to Neo Langston's arrest, he didn't hold anything back. And by the way, there is evidence that he too may have testified before the grand jury. Anyway, this is what he posted on X. This is Steve Fisher. Quote, "The arrest of Neo Langston for failure to appear to give testimony, which are the exact words used by the Sheriff's Department when speaking with me, concerns me to a certain extent, assuming this arrest is related to the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case. Targets are not typically called to testify in a case. So basically, this is somebody who may be criminally charged, right? Quote, at the state level, target letters are not always required, but subpoenaing a target without providing notice is extremely risky. A defense attorney would likely argue that any testimony was coerced. Had Neo received a target letter, he almost certainly would have retained counsel and invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. You know, right against self-incrimination, which, by the way, he may do if he ends up testifying. Quote, that makes me think that he's viewed as a witness rather than someone currently at risk of being charged. Did one person act alone in concealing Celeste's body? If this was a homicide, did a single individual act alone without a conspirator? I find that unlikely. This leads me to believe that Neo may represent a last-ditch effort by prosecutors, a Hail Mary of sorts, because they do not yet have what they need to fully make the case. They may be attempting to pressure him into cooperating, potentially by offering immunity. Is Neo the last hope? If that is the situation, it suggests the case is largely circumstantial, which could help explain the prolonged delay. I may be misreading the situation, but when I learned of Neo's arrest, my stomach dropped. I am deeply concerned about both the strength of the case and the pursuit of justice for Celeste. While charging one person is better than charging no one, everyone who bore any culpability in this minor's death or in the concealment of her body should face the most severe punishment available under the law. However, it doesn't feel like that will be the case. Not to me, anyway. Hashtag David, hashtag Celeste Rivas Hernandez. But then Steve follows it up with another ex-post. Quote, what I'm most curious about in the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case is what David's reaction or explanation was when it was disclosed on September 8th that a body had been found in a car registered to him. The only people who would know that are those who were on tour with him at the time. I know Neo started the tour with him, but I do not believe he was there for the entire duration. Rob, possibly meaning Robert Morgenroth, the manager, Rob likely was involved, but he may not have been on the road continuously or present at every show. Isia, however, I believe, was with David the entire time on the road and at each show and was with him the day the news broke. I believe that because Isia left her car at the rental house on the day they boarded the tour bus for the first show in San Francisco in July. Her car was not picked up until September 19th, when her father retrieved it late that evening as seen on surveillance. It would be extremely telling to know how those conversations unfolded after it became public that Celeste's body had been found. I am sure there was shock, not about the body itself because they already knew about that, in my opinion, but about the fact the world was now or knows of what kind of people they are. Who can do this to a 14-year-old or even have knowledge of it and still live with themselves? Months later, and not even a single offer of condolences to Celeste's family and friends from any of them. Nobody has ever been convicted of a crime by offering a condolence. And if people are offered immunity, it doesn't mean they're not guilty. It means they got lucky. But karma does not care about luck. To be clear, I am sick and bleeping tired of each day that goes by that those responsible are not behind bars. It's time to bleeping pay for what you or each of you did. Now, it is a very interesting take from Steve regarding Langston and others, and if he was allegedly involved or not, and whether or not a deal needs to be worked out, and the strength of the case, and the target of the investigation is obviously very different than a witness. We don't really know what authorities are looking at, even if there is fully a grand jury that's been impaneled, what they're looking at. But, you do wonder if this case does need to be built up on witness testimony, and whether or not there's somebody else that hasn't been identified that potentially Neo could provide testimony to. So perhaps it is David, perhaps it's David and someone else. Is it just Neo and David? This is what we don't know, and obviously you can sense Steve's frustrations if Neo was, in his view, or maybe in his view, is a central role in this and is not going to be charged, but we just don't know for sure. Because if he was to be indicted too, Steve does make a point, they wouldn't really be bringing him back to testify as a witness. And it does raise interesting questions, but once more, we don't even know the exact circumstances or Langston's connection to David or Celeste for sure. And you know what else? Authorities never even confirmed what the relationship was between Celeste and David. There's always been speculation that the two were romantically involved, despite her being a minor. And we always talk about before charges related to a potential homicide or disposal of a body, but if there was an inappropriate relationship going on and she's a minor, those are potential charges too. By the way, we made a contact with a Montana police officer who indicated, quote, "For further information regarding the investigation, please contact the Los Angeles Police Department Robbery Homicide Division." So there you go. Again, another confirmation that that specific division of LAPD is involved in the arrest of Neo Langston. But with all that in mind, now I want to go to something else. I want to go to my interview with retired Detective Commander Will Svilar. So this is from Friday. This is when the news broke of Neo Langston's arrest. It provides a little bit more context to think about in terms of his potential role, his arrest, what we can expect. Here you go.
Sounds to me like, 2 and 2, like you said, the grand jury's been convened since November. What happens then is the prosecution is presenting witness after witness, putting evidence in against a specific target or targets for a specific charge. So bringing this guy they probably believe has pertinent information to support this charge. And it sounds to me like the noose is starting to tighten around the offender.
If we assume that he was supposed to be testifying in front of the grand jury, and obviously we know grand juries are kind of one-sided, it's the prosecution presenting enough evidence to suggest, hey, can you return an indictment? First, we had thought that it was just an investigative grand jury that couldn't return an indictment. Then there was reporting, no, this is a grand jury that can return an indictment. The standard to get back an indictment is relatively low, but it's the prosecution's case. They're presenting evidence to support whatever charges they're looking for here. If we assume he's been an uncooperative witness, and we assume he's all the way in Montana, so 1,200 miles away, timeline's interesting, right? So the reporting in December of an uncooperative witness, and now in January, I wonder if they might have had trouble finding him. I don't know the circumstances of his arrest. I don't know talk to me about the cooperation if you have LAPD now working with Montana to maybe find him. I do wonder, was there an issue to figure out where he was?
Sure, it could have taken a while to find him, but once you swear out a warrant and you put a warrant across the database, across the country, anywhere this guy gets stopped, it's serviceable. As long as it's a good warrant, it's serviceable, and there's extradition involved, it gets served wherever he is. And you get it out there across law enforcement channels, you put it into leads. Once it's in leads, every law enforcement agency has it. So regardless of where he went, he was eventually going to get caught. Now, they may have had some information from whatever sources that he was up in Montana, but this could be as simple as a routine traffic stop where he gets picked up on a name check.
What do you think his connection is to this case?
Well, he's a friend. He's an influencer. I think the purpose of the grand jury is to try to find out what that connection is. And again, there's so many different things out there with these influencers and the YouTube. I don't know what his connection would be, but the grand jury wants to find out, and then prosecution wants to find out. And again, now you can bring him back, extradite him, make him go to the grand jury, but he could still take the fifth, doesn't have to testify. If it comes back, the medical examiner comes back that this is a homicide, changes everything. If it's a homicide, now you're looking at a murder charge. This grand jury is being presented information and evidence to support a specific charge against a specific person or persons. Could this guy be part of it? He could be, or he could just be a witness. Now, the benefit of bringing him in, if he decides he doesn't want to testify, he wants to take the fifth, well, then the judge can make him sit. The judge who issues a warrant can make him sit in jail. And, up to 30 days, you might change your mind.
There's the possibility, when you think about what happened to Celeste, whether or not multiple people can be involved. Do you think that this is a grand jury that is hearing evidence against multiple people, and there would be multiple indictments or indictment containing multiple defendants at the same time?
Absolutely could well be. And I can tell you, like you mentioned earlier, the threshold to get an indictment, to get probable cause to indict it, to move it on to trial, to the next phase, isn't that high. Okay, it's like probable cause. But if you're bringing all these witnesses, you're laying out a pretty complex complaint or a complaint argument that possibly there could be more than one person. Matter of fact, I'd be surprised if there was only one person.
By the way, just to go back to Neo Langston, if someone is allegedly uncooperative, does that mean they have something to hide? Or have you seen in your experience, maybe they don't want to testify for a variety of reasons?
Both ways. Either someone's got something to hide, and more often than not, when we get reluctant witnesses, and I 32 years on a job, I worked murders and violent crimes for 25 of them. Most of the time in those instances where we can't get someone to cooperate, it's because out of fear. Their fear of retribution, and they don't want to get themselves involved or their families involved.
By the way, did you see this mugshot of him? We have it. Did you see it? Where
he looks pretty
smiling. That was weird.
Yeah, he looks like he's in a good mood.
Yeah. That was interesting, just to say the least. I mean,
Yeah, I did see that.
but you also think about how young they are. I mean, you talk about 23-year-old. What's David, 20 years old? These are young people that investigators might be looking at. I think and that's, by the way, something else that everybody talks about. You know, they say if they're looking at David, it's not just in connection with the death of Celeste, but any alleged relationship he had with her. Do you think that's being explored?
Sure, absolutely. There's ages of consent. She's below the age of consent. He's over the age of consent. That's an inappropriate relationship, and not only inappropriate, but illegal. So when we talk about the indictments and the charges, that could very well be part of it.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also up on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, you can check out my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, which airs Monday through Friday every night, 11 p.m. Eastern. Hope you check it out. I'll catch you next time, everybody. Thanks so much.